The old woman's eyes, milky with age, held a sharpness that belied her gentle demeanor. She sat hunched over her loom, her gnarled fingers working a rhythm passed down through generations. "A sword," she rasped, without looking up, "can cleave flesh and bone, but words, my child, can cleave the very soul." The young girl, Maya, barely 7, shivered despite the warmth of the fire. She didn't understand then, not truly, the weight of those words. But she would. Oh, she would. The village of Oakhaven was nestled in a valley, its lifeblood the river that snaked through it and the fertile earth that yielded bountiful harvests. It was a place of simple joys and simpler grievances, where reputations were built on years of honest toil and dismantled in moments of careless chatter. Maya grew into a bright, spirited young woman, quick with a laugh and even quicker with a retort. Her tongue, though not malicious, had a tendency to outpace her good sense. She loved her village, loves the camaraderie, but there was a restless energy in her that sometimes chafed against the quiet traditions. Her best friend Ilara was her opposite, gentle, kind, and ever mindful of the feelings of others. Ilara was the steady anchor to Maya's whimsical boat. They shared secrets under the old willow tree by the river, dreamt of futures beyond Oakhaven, and navigated the awkwardness of first loves and petty squabbles. The turning point came with the arrival of Elias, a young man from the Northern Territories. He was handsome, with eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and a quiet charm that drew the attention of every unmarried woman in the village. One crisp autumn evening during the harvest festival, Elias spent most of his time dancing with Ilara. Maya watched, a sour taste in her mouth. Later, as the bonfires dwindled and the villagers began to disperse, Maya overheard a whispered comment from a group of younger girls, something about Elias's family being poor, about them having to leave their lands because of a bad debt. Instead of dismissing it or asking Ilara for clarification, a venomous seed of envy took root in Maya's heart. The next morning, fueled by a mixture of jealousy and a strange, misguided need to assert herself, she approached a group of women gathering water at the well. "Did you hear about Elias?" she began, her voice deceptively casual. "They say his family ran from their debts, left their ancestral home in shame." She embellished, adding details she'd never heard, painting a picture of a man burdened by his family's failures. The words, once spoken, took on a life of their own. Like ripples in a pond, they spread. First among the women at the well, then through their husbands, and finally into the very fabric of Oakhaven. Doubt, once planted, is hard to uproot. Elias, who had been welcomed with open arms, suddenly found himself met with guarded glances and hesitant conversations. The warmth in people's eyes turned to suspicion. Opportunities for work, which had been abundant, began to dwindle. Ilara, ever loyal, tried to defend him, but even her gentle words were no match for the insidious whispers. The whispers grew into murmurs, the murmurs into outright gossip. Elias, who had once held his head high, began to stoop, his easy smile replaced by a worried frown. He stopped attending village gatherings, his once bright spirit dimming with each passing day. Maya at first felt a strange sense of satisfaction. She had won some invisible battle, but the victory felt hollow. She saw the pain in Ilara's eyes, the quiet suffering of Elias, and a cold dread began to settle in her stomach. The old woman's words, spoken years ago, echoed in her mind. Words can cleave the very soul. One evening, Ilara confronted her, her voice trembling with hurt. "Why, Maya? Why did you say those things? They aren't true." Days turned into weeks. Elias, unable to find work and facing the constant suspicion of the villagers, made the heartbreaking decision to leave Oakhaven. He left quietly at dawn without a farewell. His departure was a silence that screamed. The village, too, felt the shift. A certain joy had gone out of it. The harvest festival the following year was subdued, lacking the vibrant energy Elias had brought. And Maya, she found herself increasingly isolated. Ilara, though still cordial, kept her distance. Others, sensing the root of Elias's departure, began to look at Maya with a new kind of wariness. Her sharp tongue, once tolerated, was now feared. Years passed. The old woman at the loom, her fingers still working, saw the change in Maya. The youthful exuberance had been replaced by a quiet introspection. Maya still had her quick wit, but now it was tempered with a profound caution. She learned to listen more than she spoke, to weigh her words before releasing them into the world. She began to volunteer her time to help the elderly, to mend fences, both literal and metaphorical, seeking to repay a debt that could never truly be settled. One spring morning, news reached Oakhaven. Elias was returning, not as a pauper, but as a respected merchant, having built a thriving business in the Northern Territories. He came not for revenge, but for closure. The village braced itself. Maya's heart pounded. She knew she had to face him, to try and atone for the irreparable damage she had caused. When Elias arrived, he was older, more weathered, but his eyes still held that familiar kindness. Maya approached him, her voice barely a whisper. "Elias," she began, her eyes brimming with tears, I am so deeply sorry. My words, they were cruel and untrue. I let my own foolishness destroy your good name here." Elias looked at her, his gaze steady. He didn't offer immediate forgiveness, but there was no malice in his eyes. "Your words did wound me, Maya," he said, his voice quiet. "They stole my peace and forced me to leave a place I had grown to love. But they also, in a strange way, forged me. They made me stronger, more resilient." He paused, then offered a small, sad smile. "The cut of a sword heals. The cut of a tongue, it leaves a different kind of scar." Maya understood. Some wounds never truly disappear. They remain as a reminder, a lesson etched into the soul. From that day forward, Maya became the quietest voice in the village, yet often the wisest. When disputes arose, she was the one who urged caution, who reminded them of the lasting power of ill-chosen words. The cut of the tongue is indeed sharper than the cut of a sword. A sword may break bones and blood, but the wounds it inflicts with time often heal. The wounds of harsh, careless, or malicious words, however, can fester in the heart, poison relationships, and destroy reputations. They leave scars that may never fully fade, reminding us of the immense responsibility that comes with the power of speech. Choose your words not as weapons, but as threads to weave a tapestry of understanding and kindness.